Welcome to the Leading Visionaries podcast, featuring stellar conversations with emerging and established leading visionaries. Thanks for joining us today as we celebrate and spotlight the leading visionaries who are thinking differently, seeing new possibilities, have the courage to dream big, take inspired action, and create conscious change all around the world. Now, here's your host, Anjel B. Harwell.
Hello again. This is Anjel B. Harwell, and I am here for another Minisode for the Leading Visionaries podcast. So I want to talk today about the pockets of time that open up. I actually just had a pocket of time that opened up for me. I had somebody who was scheduled for an interview, and for some reason, they did not show up. So when we have these amazing pockets of time, I want you to take a moment and consider exactly what you want or what you're being called, maybe even better, what you're being called to do with the pocket of time. So for today, I was called, since I have this pocket of time, to drop in this short little minisode. And then I am going to take the rest of the time to go outdoors and to nourish my body, mind, and spirit with some fresh air and maybe a nice little walk in the woods. I think it's really important that we remember to prioritize our well-being as the number one thing that we want to be taking care of. And often I have found that I call it my celestial business team. I have found that my celestial business team will create these openings, these little lovely openings of space, often when I have been squishing, when I have been trying to put too many things into my schedule. Somehow something will happen that something will get removed from my schedule, which is exactly what happened today. And that's a sign. That's a sign for me from the universe to be even more intentional about what I say yes to, what I say no to, and to tune in again to discern and determine whether or not the activities that I have put into my calendar are serving, whether they're serving me personally to be well, or whether they are serving my vision to come into fruition, or whether they are serving my business, which is supporting the vision coming into fruition, or whether I have been squishing. So I made a rule a couple of years ago that I was done with squishing. I spent most of my life squishing. We are actually the product, most of us, most of you who are listening, are probably the product of growing up in what I call the culture of busy. And we were programmed, we were conditioned, we were sometimes, maybe often punished for not constantly being in action, in some kind of activity, producing something that was tangible and, something that looking at the very least, looking like you were doing something productive, even if you were creating the illusion that you were doing something productive. So what I'm going to invite you to do today is start to consider, how much you've been seduced by the culture of busy, because the culture of busy really originated out of the industrial era, right? And in the industrial era, there was this mindset of extraction, of exploitation, of getting every last drop of labor out of the laborers and every last drop of resource out of the non-labor resources in this, drive to industrialize. Our school systems came out of the industrial era and taught us to constantly be on the clock and constantly be producing, produce. And we are now in a brand new time. We're in the time that I like to call the creative age. So we had the agricultural age, we had the industrial age, we have had the information age, the technology age. I believe we are now in what I like to call the creative age. And what the creative age requires is it requires actually a dismantling internally of all of this conditioning, all of this programming, all of this societal expectations, all of the beliefs, the patterns around having to be busy all the time, right? Having to be busy. And let me be clear that that is a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for exhaustion. It's a recipe for dysfunction. It's a recipe for disease. It's a recipe for ultimately destruction in many cases. And you can see it. You can see in our culture right now, you can see that taken to its extreme, this is a very destructive pattern. It's a very destructive program. It's a very destructive, unsustainable, and, deathly practice program to be running, right? I also want to talk about this idea, which is kind of tangential to this, but it's along the same lines of, as a visionary, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, that you got to be grinding it out. You've got to be grinding and grinding and grinding and getting, your work out there in the world. And the truth is that if you are authentically here and not just making it up, right? So only you can know the answer to that, right? If you are authentically here to create conscious change on the planet, part of the conscious change that we visionaries and leading visionaries are being called to create is the change in how we work, the change in how we honor the unseen, the change in how we operate in our relationships and in our business structures, and most definitely a change in how we treat ourselves. And how we treat ourselves, we need to stop treating ourselves like we are a throwaway, right? Like we are without value if we are not visibly producing, or behaving as if we are producing. And so as a leading visionary, in addition to bringing your vision in and bringing it into manifestation, the structures, systems, processes, and ways of doing business, ways of interacting with your team members and other stakeholders, including your clients and your customers and your supporters, the way that we relate needs to be also remade. And so one thing that we can do is not only to stop, being seduced by the culture of busy, but to begin with ourselves and to look at these pockets of time that we're gifted and become exceptionally more intentional, and to be listening to the body, listening to your source of inspiration, deeply listening to your vision, and discerning, is this open pocket of time that suddenly appeared, is it a gift for me to enjoy? Is it a gift for me to utilize in some way that produces maybe something else? So in my case today, I said, well, I'm not producing the interview, so let me produce a Minisode. And because I'm not producing the interview, there's a lot more time that's blocked for the interview. And that allows me to do two things with this pocket of open time. One, produce this Minisode, and two, use the bulk of the time to connect with my source, to care for myself, to listen in to what is really needed here. And what I'm aware of is I have been surfing the edge of squishing. And when we break our own rules, that's when we begin to lose integrity. And that's when we begin to disintegrate and become destructive to ourselves, to our vision, to our collective web of communion that we are in. And so I'm going to take a nice deep breath and out myself. I have been surfing the edge of squishing. And how do I now get myself off the edge? Well, number one, I need to go back to my commitment to being well. Number two, I need to recognize that I've actually been feeling this for a couple of days. I've been feeling that edginess, that being right up against the edge of, oh, maybe I can squish that in there. Like that's the thought form that comes. So if you're having that thought form, you're squishing. And I have been, avoiding stopping long enough to reset myself, to reevaluate what I have said yes to reprioritize and get even clearer on what is actually wanting to happen right now versus what I've in my mind decided should be happening right now. So that's another huge, huge clue when you start shoulding yourself. And so I want to invite you to use this little pocket of time in this minisode to discern if you would like to, join me in this no squishing rule and become much more spacious and much more grounded and much more centered and much more intentional about how you are using the time that you have and how you are going to leverage and employ and enjoy, and that's the key word, any pockets of time that arbitrarily, synchronistically, magically open up for you. So that's my minisode for today. I love feedback, so certainly feel free to reach back out through the Leading Visionaries podcast community or through our website, leadingvisionariespodcast.com. You can reach out there. And if you're interested in finding out about how to play and work with me, certainly reach out for that as well. I look forward to connecting with you again on the next minisode. And I'm over and out. Outside to play for the rest of today.
Thanks for tuning in, downloading, and listening. Be sure to rate and review Leading Visionaries on Apple Podcasts and share with other people you know who can benefit from today's episode. Leading Visionaries is the premier podcast series for informing, activating, and inspiring the leading visionaries who are called to create conscious change and know that now is the best time to welcome wealth and cultivate a web of collaborative support to bring their vision to life. We invite your feedback and guest suggestions and invite you to subscribe to our mailing list to be notified of new episodes at leadingvisionariespodcast.com.